Welcome to the Convey Culture podcast, where we delve into the vibrant tapestry of generations Alpha, Z, and Millennials. We're here to amplify their voices, break down biases, and shatter stereotypes. Get ready to explore the fascinating world of culture and identity and discover the true impact it has on our lives. Join us on this captivating journey. This is the Convey Culture podcast. Yes, it is my absolute honor to have Ameer with me today. When I first met Ameer, I remember thinking how impressed I was that someone at his age had this huge amount of self awareness, had this great understanding of how he wanted to move in the world, but also this wonderful understanding of where he wanted to go in the future and how to kind of utilize tools around him, and also an incredible leader at your age. And I'm sure at any age, you'll continue to be an incredible leader. So one of the first people I thought of when I wanted to do the podcast was having you on, because I think you just have a really unique story and experience as a member of the Gen Z generation. So thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Of course. Yeah. No, I'm honored to be one of the first. And I really appreciate the kind words. You gave me a lot of confidence when you said stuff like that, back when I was, I think, 19 or something like that.
It's all true, so it makes it really easy to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I want you to be able to tell your own story and who you are. So one of my first questions is just really getting to know you. So how do you identify in terms of culture, race, ethnicity, and do you feel closely connected to your culture?
100%. Yeah. I identify as Palestinian-American, if you will. And I feel like as a Palestinian, you don't really have a choice but to feel strongly connected to your cultural identity. Always growing up in living rooms with the news on, always keyed into any flare ups in the occupation, always hearing your like adults arguing about things like that. And to be honest with you, that kind of made me grow up like almost being the type of person to be like, oh, I hate politics. Like, I don't really want to get into that. But being Palestinian, as you get older, you start to realize how much of a privilege it is to have that kind of perspective. And yeah, that kind of idea gets you to be like, feel really strongly with your cultural identity. Um, so yeah, 100% Palestinian through and through.
It's interesting because I feel like when you're of any culture and you kind of have this span where people, when they first see you, what they assume your culture is, and then you have to kind of reinforce that. I even find that as a Black person, I'm like, oh, let me educate you. I'm actually Afro Latina in here. Do you
Mhm.
find a lot you're having to reinforce what your culture is and who you are?
Yeah. I think maybe not reinforce, but like re-explain like what it means. I think, being Palestinian, there's a lot of layers to it. There's a lot of history that, to be honest with you, isn't taught to people here in America, at least. So a lot of times when people ask me like about Palestine, like, do you have family in Palestine? XYZ, like there's a lot of backstory that goes behind that. So that's what I end up having to do fairly often if people are interested.
I'm interested. So I would love, I know you've told me some really great stories about your family and just cultural experience that you have. Do you have one that you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have probably plenty. Not sure which one you'd like to.
We'll keep it to a in this realm of knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. So my mom and I, since I was about 16, we volunteered with the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. And incredibly gratifying experience. It was great for me, like career wise, wanting to be in a communications marketing space. And first of all, what the Palestine Children's Relief Fund does is raises money to revitalize the health sector in occupied Palestine. And another thing that they do is they take war injured children from Palestine to America to get the medical attention that they need. Often that's like prosthetics or certain procedures that they can't get over there quite yet. And then, make sure they're all set and they can live the rest of their lives comfortably and send them back home. So that's kind of where the fundraising goes towards. And we are just the Portland chapter having events and stuff like that. But we did have a kid. He came at 14 to, he unfortunately, him and his family were involved in a bombing and he lost, I believe, his left leg. So what he needed was a prosthetic. He came and got that at 14 and came and got resized for it at 16. So I was really able to almost like get close to him. And he just gave me like so much perspective as to this. At 14, I thought he was 18. At 16, he
Wow.
could have been 22. He was just, with everything that he's been through, he was just so strong and so, you could say, like opinionated and like almost unapologetic, that it made me kind of realize almost like the privileges that I have growing up here and, the sheltering, for him to be honest with you, to come to America by himself and live with these random people to get his prosthetics and be totally cool about it. And yeah, it was definitely gratifying, eye-opening experience that made me feel a little bit more connected to my cultural identity.
So this is why when I opened, I said how impressed I was by you, because this is what I think is the difference. Gen Z gets so much crap. I really do think they get a lot of crap about who they are, and they don't show up for work and these things. But then you hear these incredible stories about things that Gen Z is doing at your age and making an impact and how they see the world differently. And I think, thank you for sharing that, because I do think your whole generation gets a bad rap on that piece too.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm a busybody, so I always try to keep involved in something, and that's something I've been involved in for a while. It's fun. I like fundraising, event planning, stuff like that, and of course, it's for a great cause that I feel strongly connected to.
It is. And I do feel like your generation does a lot more in kind of driving cultural change and shaping the future of society in a way that I'm a millennial, and I think we started to do that, but it felt like we didn't make it as much progress. But I'm seeing your generation like, no, actually, we're taking this to the next level. How do you see your generation making change?
Um, in many ways, but I think with the tools that we've grown up with,
Yeah.
social media being the obvious big one, um, it kind of just like lifts the mask on everything and lifts the like the kind of like the mystique behind everything. I kind of feel like maybe millennials a little bit less, but generations before that, they kind of grew up with almost like a belief that any person of influence is in that position for a reason, and like they are highly qualified, they're always making the right decisions, things like that. Like there was just kind of a mask behind things. But with social media, like all this information that we have, and just constant access, the mystique behind like even like the president or something like that is kind of gone. So, and there's you can't fix a problem until you identify it. So what our generation is super quick at doing is identifying problems, and that of course is step one. Um, but yeah, like I was saying, like there's a lot of steps.
To make it.
Yeah, to make it
I
to make
love
it.
that because I do see that in your generation. Like even what you saw in Tennessee not even a few months ago, but you're right. Historically, if something like that had happened in Tennessee with elected officials and they got pulled out for protesting honestly about gun rights, you would have seen and protecting children. You would have never heard about it, right? But now social media, it allows for transparency. And this is my own agenda, but I do feel like part of the push against social media is because of that, because you don't get to hide in the same way that you could, I think, previous to that.
Mhm.
There's less of a Wizard of Oz effect about politics now that you're seeing them before.
Exactly, and it's not even just politics; it's everything. Like we'll never have another Michael Jackson. You know what I mean? We never will, because we'll never see a human as so like you know godly,
Yeah,
just because there's so much access now. So
I
yeah.
agree. I definitely agree. I think celebrity is going to mean a different thing, especially even what we're seeing in with AI and some of the advances in marketing. I don't even think we'll have CMO gods like we used to either. I think it'll start shifting a little bit because like, oh, he's the CMO or they're the CMO. I think you'll see some of that shift.
Yeah, you'll be able to go on LinkedIn and see how we got there and be like, oh yeah, I could do that.
I'll figure that out. I could get there somehow. I know. I do think so. You and I are both in marketing, and I feel like we both sat at the table when brands come and they describe something. They're like, "I want to reach a multicultural Gen Z audience," or "I want to," And to hear them describe your culture back to you, even for me, like when I hear I'm like, ooh, that is like 90% stereotypes. Where are you getting this information from? I always have this moment of like cringe when I hear brands talk about how to do it. What advice would you give to brands and marketers who are trying to reach your age group also, but also your culture authentically?
Where I cringe is, I mean, I think the number one, Gen Z insight for all brands for the last like decade at this point, is that Gen Z like to see their values, mirrored in their brands. But sometimes I cringe because Gen Z is also really smart. We can see through
Yeah.
a lot of, like shallow campaigns and things like that. So I guess like what my advice would to be like, instead of making a campaign centered around women's rights because you believe that Gen Z will resonate with that, it's a lot more impactful and a lot less shallow for it to be the brand's mission. Like instead of the
Yeah.
campaign's mission to be the brand's mission is kind of the distinction there. And it's like I said, it's a distinction that the consumer, Gen Z consumer, can see. So you might throw a video out there that's super well produced and super amazing, and it gets a lot of just a lot of good press, but it's not really going to last if
No.
it's just one campaign. It's really got to be like a brand mission.
I That resonates with me so much because even as someone who's not in your generation, I feel like you can tell when it's inauthentic. Or already we're seeing all these big DE&I promises that were made start to roll back, and like, oh, maybe we don't care about this, maybe. And so you can feel the inauthenticity with a brand, or when they're off base, or when they mess up. I'm like, just say you messed up, just say you messed up, and make it right. Like whatever this is really odd and uncomfortable, and no one likes that.
Yeah, for
What
sure.
role? So go ahead.
I was gonna say you just gotta fall on the sword.
You do. I made a mistake. So I try to dabble in at least almost most of the big social media platforms, but the one I found most addicting by far, and I know like addicting is a bad thing, but TikTok, because I can just sit there and it's like scrolling through a TV. Like I love it, but I do find I'm surprised at how little. I thought I'd be more influenced to purchase things on TikTok, and sometimes I am. Sometimes it's interesting the relationship you have to those. How much does social media do you feel like influence you, but also influence you to purchase things and buy
Um, you told me to bring my authentic self to this, Bianca, and my authentic self is cheap.
things?
So I don't I don't know how much I purchase based off of TikTok, but I have a lot of friends that really purchase like a lot of their clothes because they saw it on either often Instagram or TikTok. Um, the TikTok algorithm is so calculated to the point to where like I have friends who are nurses, and every other ad they get is for like a scrub company, right? And all the different collections that they get, they're always getting ads for it. So I think social media and like almost like what do we call it? Like influencer marketing in a way is kind of how that influence comes. It's just like you can go out there into the real world and see like, oh, people are wearing this kind of stuff, so it's cool, let me go get it. But when you're in bed and you can look on Instagram and be like, oh, people are wearing this stuff, it's cool, I can get it right now. That's kind of like the difference there.
That
um
immediate satisfaction you get to from like yeah, it's I think what's fascinating about social media that I am finding just from a culture perspective is how much everyone's just mimicking each other. Like there's things that I'd see that potentially would belong to one cultural group, and I see it on TikTok, and then you watch it like 3 months later and everyone's making the same hand gesture and making the same statement. So I do wonder what the impact will be on culture. Like, will we dull down our culture by how we're experiencing? Like, I'm curious what we'll think about social media 10 years from now and what we feel about it.
Man, I mean, we'll never know, right? But one thing that I think will happen is just it's just going to travel so much faster. I just
Mm-hmm.
think that there's always like slang like that the East Coast or the South used that eventually made it out here to where I live in Portland. But I watched words that my cousins use in Austin end up
Yeah.
like in my friend group 3 years later, right? I think now that time is a lot shorter. I just think that things like that are going to travel, hand gestures, word slang, all that kind of stuff, much faster.
Wow. I think you're right about that because I'm seeing it happen so much quicker. Where I'm like, that was just this, and then you're seeing it cross over. All right, so we'll get into some rapid fire questions, and you can answer them quick or you can add. We'll go through a few of them. But
All right.
first, if you could work for any brand, work with any brand, you don't have to quit your job. If you want to work with any brand, who would it be and why?
Man, who would I work with? A brand? I would probably work. I'd probably work with a nonprofit. That's kind of always been my thing. Is trying to make it to the nonprofit world and squeeze my way in there. I just think that I mean, working for marketing for a brand is fun, right? But it's almost like you're just kind of doing the same thing for every brand and just trying to increase revenue. But for a nonprofit, there's obviously the higher purpose, but there's just a different kind of set of tools that are at your disposal. And I think it'll just be, I've obviously have the experience from what I volunteered with since I was 16. So that's kind of the direction I would love to go in. As far as a specific one, I'm not totally sure.
Yeah,
Obviously there are causes that I feel strongly about, but maybe I
but
should
you're
do that
still, it
research.
may be your own brand. How about that?
There we go.
All right, one celebrity you want to collaborate with and one you want to get advice from.
I would love to collaborate with LeBron just because I want to meet LeBron. I just think LeBron.
Here's one reason. That's a good one though.
Yeah, pretty much. I would love to meet LeBron. And then I would love to get advice from someone like Trevor Noah. I really
Yeah.
like Trevor Noah. I've watched a lot of Trevor Noah interviews. Very educated, like worldly. Um, just he's a good dude, and I
Good
would love
one.
to kind of go out to dinner with him and just pick his brain.
That's a good one. I started to say either Jay-Z or LeBron because I feel like Jay-Z's business sense is just insane. So I'd be curious like how his piece is. But
Mhm.
Trevor Noah is another one that I would be. I have to pick Michelle Obama because that would be
Of
like, what
course.
are you doing? All right. What are the least likely three words someone would use to describe you?
Least likely. Oh man, so now I feel like this is a fun way to compliment myself. I feel
Right?
like
Do it. Do it.
I'll start with I feel like nobody would really describe me as loud. I've been described as soft spoken, and I can definitely be extroverted, but I don't think I'm a very loud person. So maybe that one. Um, Nobody could describe me as lazy. Like I said earlier, like I'm a busybody. Like I always keep involved in something. So no one can ever describe me as lazy. I'll make sure of that. And a third one, okay, fine. I'll say it. Nobody can describe me as boring. All right. I'm not
I like it.
I feel
I
like
like it.
I can make people laugh, liven a room up. I'm not the most boring person ever, so hopefully that I don't get that one.
I'll back you up on all three of those. I'll back you up. I agree.
I appreciate it.
What are your favorite content sources? It can be social media, it can be streaming services, it can be a website. What are your favorite content sources?
Well, to be completely honest, my favorite type of content is like basketball and hip hop content. That's just my hobbies, and I get pretty much all of that from Twitter and YouTube. Whether it's new music to come out or stats on Twitter, and then like I was saying with Trevor Noah, I watch a lot of like long form interviews on YouTube, and there's a lot of knowledge behind those. So that's really where I get a lot of my content.
Yeah, I feel like YouTube is the one. I'm shocked at how much time and how much information I rely on YouTube for. It surprises me actually when you see your content consumption about how much on YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube's like, all right. And then next, we talked about this a little bit. Actually, I'm going to ask you a different question.
Go ahead.
Lakers or Warriors for this next round? Who's going to go ahead? Lakers or
Um,
Warriors?
I'm the biggest Warriors hater you'll ever meet
Oh,
because
that's right. Because
because I'm a
Blazers.
Blazers fan, and it hasn't been fun in the last 8 years. So I'm gonna go fully Lakers.
LeBron and Lakers. And who will take it all, do you think? Who's going to win it all?
I think whoever comes out of the East. I don't
Oh, you
like.
think the East? You don't
Yeah,
think the Lakers will?
I don't think
Yeah.
the Lakers or the Nuggets are gonna come out are gonna come out on top.
No, they tried. All right. You have $300 to spend on something selfish. You cannot donate this to a cause. It has to be something you go out and buy that's just fun and ridiculous. What are you buying?
I like this question because, like I said, I'm cheap, but it's a free
It's
$300.
free money. Go spend it.
I'd probably get a pair of Jordans because I've worked with the Jordan brand, but I've never owned a pair of Jordans in my life. I was not that like middle school kid that had like 12 of them and stuff. I don't know. I've just never spent a lot of money on clothes, and $300 on a pair of shoes sounds ridiculous.
I
So,
know. Amir, you're in Portland. We know people. We can get you your first pair of Jordans. Like, we need to know what size. I'm gonna call somebody like Amir needs a pair of Jordans. This is what he's doing.
I love that.
I'm I did not own my first pair of Jordans until I was 30. Same. Because I growing up in Portland, Jordan was cool, but it felt like you could get Nike so easily that I was like, and so I actually like Dunks a little bit more than Jordans, I think. So that's funny.
But
I didn't know my first pair till 30.
yeah,
It's
I just want one.
just one.
Yeah,
Any specific ones?
fours, Jordan fours.
Orange. Well, that's why you've been waiting. So that's
Why not?
the $300 number.
Exactly.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much. Anything I didn't ask you that you want to share? Anything cool that you're like, hey, you should have asked me this about my culture or
Um, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'll use this time to plug myself. So,
identity?
follow,
Do it. Go for it.
follow me on Instagram, Ameer_Safadi12. Like I said, I always got something going on. So,
You
um,
do.
I'm not the most boring follow. I'm not boring.
You are not. Amir, I know you have an incredible future ahead of you, so I'll continue to follow and see where you're up to and see what you're doing because I think you're going to be one of those people that, has a big impact on the world. So thank you so much for joining me. I feel like you are an excellent representation of not only your culture, but also your generation. You made them all proud. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. No, this was a ton of fun. I appreciate it, Bianca.
Thank you.